What's happening, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Athletes to Athletes podcast. Today, the Black History Month conversations continue with Miss Keisha J Kelley, the founder of Black College Experience, who is one of the most prominent voices in HBCU sports. Keisha takes us through her journey to create BCE, along with the pitfalls that she's had to face as a Black woman in sports. So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Ms. Keisha J Kelley, the creator and owner of Black College Experience. We are back with another Athletes to Athletes podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with the always magnificent Miss Keisha J Kelley. Don't forget the J in her name. Never. It's the emphasis. The emphasis comes in the middle. It's never a period at the end. It's a J in the middle. So, Keisha, I am so excited that we can finally get on and chop it up. As I told you before, been following you for a very long time, and you know, I kind of went fan on you when we met, because I met you at the Black Sports Business Symposium and came up to you and I said, I've been following you for a while and I had to come and get a picture and just meet you. So, you know, I'm really glad that we had a chance to meet there. And I'm really glad to have you on the show, but I'm going to allow you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, let everybody know who Miss Keisha J Kelley is and where you're from and what you do.
So first and foremost, thank you so much for having me today. Yes, he's absolutely correct. Do not forget the J. Keisha J Kelley. It's something my father did. It was always the same with my father. So it's kind of like I followed in his footsteps. The emphasis is always on the middle initial. Even on my credentials, I ask for my middle initial. But I'm Keisha J Kelley from Huntsville, Alabama, by way of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because I am a 2003 graduate of Southern University, A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I am the CEO and founder and reporter of Black College Experience, which is HBCU sports media with the mission and vision to bring positive exposure to HBCU athletics.
Yeah, and you know, with everything that you do with Black College Experience, I want to kind of go back to when you were, a youngster. Were sports always such a major role for you growing up?
No, absolutely not. I was always active in something. Of my parents' 4 children, I was the active one that was always in something. I played basketball in 8th grade for, I don't even know if it was a month, but I did. I played basketball. I was always the active one. So basketball, band, anything I could be active in, I was always doing. But as like a young child, I was never, active just outside, but I was never active like in a sport, a rec sport, anything like that. Aside of that basketball, that was it.
Mm-hmm. So how did sports become such a major part of your life?
High school, I started, we were watching basketball. And here's the funny thing. Football is actually my favorite sport now, but basketball in high school was my sport. That was the sport that I enjoyed sitting down to watch. And it might have been because my school's team was so good. So it was one of those things, but it definitely started in high school, started watching it, started following it. And then, after graduation from college, it just became a heightened experience.
Yeah, for sure. Going to an HBCU, sports is different, right? It's a culture. It's obviously we all get a chance to see what it looks like in, the D1 sports, whether you're at Florida State or FAMU or LSU. We all get a chance to see that, but that cultural aspect of a game day at an HBCU is just different. So, can you kind of give our audience what it feels like being at a school that you went to, which is huge on game day, right? What is that atmosphere like, and what is that culture like on game day?
On game day, I tell people, if you've never been to a HBCU homecoming, it's something you got to experience. It's an out of body, out of mind type of an experience. And of course, everybody thinks that their HBCU has the best homecoming, but those game days, they are just, it's one of those feelings you can't describe because, of course, coming from one of the larger HBCUs, you have With us, it's the whole tailgating experience. So it's not just a football game. You have tailgating, you got foods, you have Greeks, you have vendors. It's so much going on game day. And then you have the whole experience as to like some people have, things set up in like their, like in their end zones. It's so much going on those actual game days. And then, you bring in the camaraderie of the band. That's a whole nother level. The band's in, the band's hyped up, the football team's hyped up, everybody's talking trash. And if it's a rivalry, it's even more hyped. And so that day, just kicking off football season and you're looking at all of the recruits and what everybody's doing, you're just excited. It's just a culture that really can't be explained.
Yeah. I mean, and you speak about the band, kind of like the J in your name, the emphasis on game day, it comes in the middle of the day. It comes in the middle of the game. And, give us a little bit of insight on what it's like being at one of these Battle of the Bands or seeing the HBCU homecoming and having the band perform and what that means being on an HBCU campus.
Being on a campus, the band is about as, you're practicing all day. It's an all day, twice a day, early mornings, just like sports. And so, it's so many people that it's so much exposure that has been highlighted and shown on your bands, your Human Jukebox, your Sonic Boom, your Marching 100, it's so many, your Marching Maroon and White, so many bands now have that exposure where they have that media team. And so now what happens is on game day, if you're not there to see it, you can always go back and watch it. So it's almost like you're there with them, watching it on the channel, watching it on YouTube. And honestly, it's a major recruiting tool. It's a major recruiting tool for a lot of schools because you have so many kids that look at us and say, hey, I want to go march in the band, not knowing how much work goes into it. But all we see is the final product. It's so much that goes into it before game day comes around, all the nervous and all the jitters. And you imagine what you're like as a freshman on game day, your first game, versus what you're like as a senior. And so we get to see that marching in, you have dancing dolls and you get to see that firsthand. And I often have to remind myself, these are still students because they look so grown up, but I have to remind these are still students, but to actually just be in that atmosphere and just to take it all in, it's just different.
Yeah. Now, did you always want to go to an HBCU or was it something that the culture kind of brought you into as you went on college visits and really started to kind of feel your way out becoming an adult?
So I'm older. I always knew I was going to a black school. It was always going to be a HBCU, that I did know, but I'm from Alabama. So all we knew was Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Tuskegee. Anything in Alabama is what you knew, mainly Alabama A&M, Alabama State. Those were the schools that we knew about. And so my twin sister graduated from Alabama A&M. Of course, I graduated from Southern. Southern was not my first choice. FAMU was my first choice. And I did, I wasn't one of those people like now they have so many college tours. I didn't have college tours. I didn't do college tours. As a matter of fact, when I went to go register at Southern, I had never even been on campus. And so when I went to go register, it's like a whole new world. So I knew I was going to a HBCU, which one I didn't know, but I knew I was going to one of them.
Yeah. And why is that? Was that something that was just, and you mentioned that, Alabama A&M was just what you knew growing up in Alabama, but was it like a cultural thing that came from your parents, your friends, something like that? Is that where it kind of came from?
Probably more than likely, because everybody that we were around was mostly Alabama A&M. And like I always say, Alabama A&M raised me. Southern University educated me. So, that's how it was. We were raised on the campus of Alabama A&M. So that's what we were used to. Magic City Classic. That's what we were always around. And that's what we knew. So definitely, exposure from parents. Yes.
Yeah. So now as you get into college and you're a teenager, essentially, you're figuring out what it is you want to do. When you're on campus, how do you figure that out, right? How do you get into your major? What did you major in? And do you feel that turned you into who you are now?
Well, actually, my undergrad was in psychology. My master's was in business. And so I figured that, I was like, this is what I want to do. And it's because in high school, I had taken psychology classes. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to counsel people. I want to fix people. I want to help people. And then I got to school and was like, okay, well, all I'm doing is reading and researching and studying. It was not a hard thing. I was like, okay, so I can remember stuff. I have a brain a mile long. I'm good with that. And then once I graduated, I was like, okay, now it's time to see what you're going to do. Because after graduation, it's okay. Now it's time to go get a job. Now it's time to get employment.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it was so many. Oh, you need a master's degree or a PhD. And I'm like, wait, this is not what I thought I was going to school for. And so I did some counseling and I said I wanted to go back to school. And so I'm dabbling in this and dabbling in that. And then I was like, let me get my behind out of school. Let me go ahead and get this master's in business, which is what I did, and got out of school. It was never my intentions, not a day in my life did I ever sit down and say, oh, I want to work in sports. I never sat down and did that. Not one day.
Yeah. So what ultimately led you to sports and becoming, at least in my opinion, one of the staples of HBCU sports and one of the biggest voices when it comes to HBCU sports?
So I did. I'm very humble. And so when I hear those kind of words, I have to take a moment and just kind of pause. I was actually, when I graduated in the summer of 2003, when I graduated, I actually went to work. After I was working in mental health, I actually went to work for a National Basketball Developmental League. So I was working with a basketball team. And it was just like the game day where, they throw the stuff in the crowd. Like I was on that team. I was that person. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I might can get with this. And I did. At that time, I had a young niece, a young nephew. And every single time when those games came around, I always made sure that my niece and nephew had something. I don't care if the shirt was 10 times too big. I always made sure that they had whatever it was that they were giving out. And they would sit on the front row. No brainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so after I started working, and that was in 2004, I was like, I kind of like this. After that, I just started following arena football. And arena football was really big in Huntsville at that time. It was Arena 2. So it was really big. And I started following it. I started writing about it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what it's all about. So I kind of went from there. I was working with a couple of players, nonprofits at the time. And after I started, kind of dabbling from football to basketball, mainly football, it just kind of fell into, okay, this is exactly what you want to do after the writing and research. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. So how did you come to establish Black College Experience? And, obviously I have your resume and I've got a couple of things. You were in radio, you've been a voice in sports for a very long time, but how did BCE finally come to fruition? And how did you know that that's where your voice was mainly going to be needed?
So we were one day, I think I was sitting down and, 2011, this is after I had moved to Atlanta, and one of my friends had said, as a matter of fact, the person that turned me on the radio, her dad was my basketball coach when I played. It was her dad that was my coach. And so she saw something in me and she said, you try radio. Maybe, I think I know some people. And I came here. And like I said, I always tell people it's easy to have a conversation and dialogue, but doing radio by yourself is another beast. And I was so excited when I got there. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do radio on a Sunday night. It's like a prime time slot. And it was just me. And I was like, oh. Got there and, you can't have dead air. And I had dead air. And I was like, okay, this is not my style. This is not for me. This ain't my thing. And people started calling in and I was so thankful. But shortly after, they lost their dial. And I said, okay, well, maybe it's not what I'm supposed to do. God, let me step away from it. Maybe this is not my thing. And so after that, other people started catching wind to what I was doing because I would still do radio, but I was never talking about Black college sports. And then eventually I would introduce like a 15-minute segment of just like scores, but I was only talking about the Southwestern Athletic Conference. I was only talking about the SWAC. So they were like, well, what about the other people? Then I started talking about maybe the MEAC. I started talking about other conferences, but then there's stuff going on in every school. And I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna have to introduce all of these. So after that, I went into another broadcast on Sunday. On Sundays, I was doing 3 shows a day. I was doing 3 shows on Sundays. literally through like an hour in each broadcast. It was so much to do, research, produce. It was a lot. But I was doing those 3 shows.
Yeah.
And it was like I had to make sure I had those HBCU stats and stuff in there when I was doing it. And one of the guys that was producing the show, he said, why don't you do a 2-hour HBCU? And I said, listen, I can't keep people's attention for 1 hour. You think somebody gonna listen for 2? And he said, it just depends on. And I was like, nah, let me play around with it. And so we started looking at it. And I started playing around with some names. And one of my friends that she did her undergrad at Southern and went on to get her doctorate from Alabama, we were playing around with stuff. And she came up with the name Black College Experience. So maybe the Black College Experience. I think we dropped the, but it was Black College Experience. And I think in on the hike 2015, when I was doing 2016 is when I was getting ready. It was like, all right, we got to go ahead and launch it. We got to go ahead and kick it off. And the co-host I had at the time, there was a girl that was supposed to be on co-hosting with me. And she was for a while. And then things happened. She got really busy and I needed another co-host. And my co-host came as a guy from Mississippi Valley named Jared Thomas. He came on. And I mean, to this day, this guy still has my back. Like if I call him and be like, yo, I need a co-host, I need somebody, he has my back for every single thing that I do. He truly does. And so I am so thankful, so grateful for him in any aspect of anything I need. He always had my back. And so right when I was getting ready to kick off the show, I think we were looking at May or so, somewhere around there, my father got sick. And like the week or 2 we were going to kick it off, my dad passed away. So when he passed away, I had to delay it more time. And once we started July, or was it actually May? Once I started and we got everything back into rhythm, it's just been going ever since.
Mm-hmm. And once you started to kind of get that ball rolling and you're covering here and you're covering there, did you start to see that traction from the community, and were people starting to embrace the things that you were doing once they saw who was behind the microphone?
Not in the beginning. That was the hardest thing to buy in, trying to get people to buy into what you're talking about, trying to get people to see there's somebody else on the scene. There's a woman, it's a Black woman. And so trying to get people to buy into it was probably the toughest thing. And, I knew it was some challenges that were going to come with it because there were a lot of people that doubted it in the first place. So, it was about being consistent. It was about being knowledgeable. It was about just, continuing to perfect the craft from day to day is what ultimately got people to buy into what I was actually, what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it, not just as a woman in sports, but as a Black woman in sports, you're constantly overlooked. You have a moving goalpost. Let's call it what it is. It's tough to be a Black woman in sports. So how did you combat some of the stereotypes, some of the people that kind of just brushed it off as maybe it's something that's here today, gone tomorrow, and kind of stay that course? I mean, you mentioned being consistent, but how hard is it to block those things out and continue down that path? So
one of those people, I really believe in, as you heard me say, I was dabbling in everything. I'm one of those people, I'm like, it's more to sports than just baseball, basketball, football. What happens when no one's covering gymnastics or track and field or swimming or paddling or whatever the sport is? And so I was one of those people, I was like, you have to expand, you have to branch out, you have to cover something that nobody else is covering, because once that big break comes, you're going to be able to put your stamp on it and say, hey, I was the person that was covering that when nobody else was talking about it. And that was one of the things. It's always been about the expansion of it. You have to make sure you cover everything. You have to make sure you're talking about more than just one thing, more than just what's hot, more than and you have to go where other people aren't going. And I knew as a Black woman facing that in sports, you have to go where other people aren't. Even if I have a male co-host, as I said, it was always about me going the extra mile, because I knew there's going to be naysayers. There are going to be people that are going to constantly doubt that no matter how much research, how much work I did, it was going to always be a but or what if behind it.
For sure. And, you hit the nail on the head just now with, now you couldn't just talk about the it thing and currently the it thing is football. You had Prime, Eddie George was just on Shannon Sharp's show, and you had Ed Reed doing some things with Bethune-Cookman. And now it is kind of the flavor of the month where everyone's eyes are on HBCUs, and everyone now has an opinion on something you've been covering since day one. What's it like for you? And, you don't want to be a gatekeeper, but you kind of have to be, right? Because this is a space you've lived in for years, and now everybody just wants to have their eyes on it because of the people that are now becoming involved. How hard is it for you to say, hey, wait, you guys don't just get a chance to come in and butt in and get to the front of the line. We've been here. We've been doing it. How hard has it been with all these kind of celebrity coaches coming in with all these different things happening? And like I said, you're the voice. And now everybody else is trying to kind of come in and be the voice. How hard is it to do something like that with somebody who has been living it as long as you have?
For me, I do. I always tell people, like, exclusively when Prime, I graduated from Southern. I'm not even a Jackson State grad. So when Prime initially came in, I done that first interview. And I tell people all the time, I was like, it's really not anything new to me, because again, when Jackson State was 3-8, 3-9, 3 and whatever, I was covering Jackson State then. If Jackson State goes back to the place, I'm going to still be covering Jackson State as they were. So, for me, it's all about respecting the people that were there before. And I don't think there's a reason to shade people when you come in like, oh, this person ain't doing this and this person isn't doing that. And that's why I always try to set the standard and separate what I do with what I do. I'm always trying to find something. So if I know that everybody is going to a certain thing, I'm gonna one up you. I'm gonna try to one up you. I'm gonna try to one up you. Okay, we can all be going to the same event covering the same thing. But if there's any way that I can get access to something additional to that, I'm going for it. Whatever it is that I can do to set myself apart from that, I'm always going to go for it, because there are so many people that feel like, oh, well, I have this type of content, or I know this person, or I'm doing this, I automatically get to jump to the front of the line. And that's just not how it is. I'm like, you got some OGs that's literally been in these games like 30, 40 years. And I respect those people. And then you just got people that just appeared on the scene when it's, as my boy says, it's like a ambulance just waiting on the next crash. And I like the way he used that analogy, because it made sense. It's like some people are waiting on the next crash, and you're not exposing us in a great way. You're exposing us for something to talk about. And that's what I can't get with.
Yeah. Exactly. And as I said, you've got so many people that have their eyes on it. And when everything was going down, me knowing you and following you before Prime was at Jackson State and in the SWAC, when he was still in high school, coaching in high school, me knowing that you were the voice, I come to your page to see what's going on. And there's multiple people coming to your page to see what's going on. So you've really carved out yourself as being a constant person that's going to be there. Did the people, and you said you got that first interview with Prime, did those coaches start to recognize that you were one of those people that had been there? And how did you feel did it feel kind of like the hard work had paid off when you established yourself and gained the respect of Prime and some of these other coaches that were there on those media days?
Because, so many times, like I said, everybody has their shtick that they do when they're on media days. On those media day calls, on those coaches calls, I was always the person, again, that asked something that was, it was just off the cuff. Everybody want to talk about, playing on this side of the ball or that side of the ball, or defense or offense, or your son or your kid or your whatever, this and that player. And I'm like, well, if it's, say, 15 people on the call, and if that question has been asked, I got to find something else to ask. And so I'm okay, well, coach, I like this about your ensemble. Did you find something to eat, or what did that mean? And again, that whole phrase, I believe I was the first person to ask him that. I was the first person for him to actually tell what that meant. And so when he actually talked about that, it's like, okay, now you've established a different relationship. You know, you got in the picture, you talking about the different things. And when we get on media calls, okay, you know, it's different respect, a different level, because I'm like, well, at the end of the day, you know, women, I'm just a woman having this conversation with a man is how I look at it. And so now what I get now all the time, coaches and athletic directors and commissioners or whomever it is, thank you for what you do. I get that all the time. Thank you for everything that you do for HBCUs. And it's not even I just started type thing. It's okay now that you see it because it's really in your face because I've done so much of it. Now you can recognize it because it's like, you know, so many people have mentioned it, but a lot more respect from a lot more people. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, something that we just saw with the Super Bowl is 2 black quarterbacks for the first time ever. Pre-game, they honor Doug Williams, first black quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, but he's also an HBCU grad. And one of the things that he said in a lead-up interview that they had with him was he wasn't a black quarterback until he got the start in Washington, right? So there's such a differentiator between HBCUs where you're just a quarterback, or you go to a PWI and you are a black quarterback. You know, it's so different, right? The worlds are so different. But what did it mean to you as somebody who's been covering HBCUs for as long as you have to see Black history happen during Black History Month with those 2 black quarterbacks, and then honoring somebody, you know, like Doug Williams? I know he went to Grambling, but honoring somebody like Doug, you know, during that time.
And I'm going to add this too. So Harold Carmichael was the other person that graduated from Southern, which is also a Hall of Famer. So of course we got the shine there. And it's so funny because Doug's daughter and I are really good friends. She did her undergrad at Grambling, but she did her master's at Southern. So I think I had watched the NFL Network earlier, and Steve Weiss and him, they were talking, they were on that panel. And I sent her the video and I said, you know, I don't miss a Doug Williams fight. And she said, Keisha, you really don't. You don't. I said, I don't miss anything. And so I think I was talking to my twin sister later on, and I told her, she said, are you going anywhere to watch Super Bowl? I said, nah, I'm going to stay at home. I said, because if they have some HBCU stuff on there, I like to record it and watch it back. And when I saw that opening, all I could say was, oh. It was really, it's one of those moments, because I always feel like no matter what, Doug Williams is always the voice. He's going to always be the voice of HBCUs. The same thing I said about Steve Weiss. It's like they're the drum majors. Doug is going to always have a seat at the table, no matter where he is. Doug is always invited to the barbecue, wherever, the seafood boil, wherever. And to actually see that happen, you know, Black History Month, like you said, 2 black quarterbacks. It was so, and then for Jalen Hurts, his whole management team is women, all women. Yeah. And I'm just like, and the majority of them were sisters. I was just like, oh my God, like we're just getting it. We're just, you know, we're just definitely feeling it. And just to see that happen, you know, and especially, you know, because I'm a SWAC born and bred person, to see that happening, it was a moving moment.
Yeah. So Keisha, this is the part where we do what's called 5 questions, and I got some questions for you, kind of rapid fire a little bit. So first question for you is, what was the first event that you covered under that BCE banner where somebody recognized you and it really solidified that you were doing the right thing?
Let's see. You know what? I'm gonna say it had to be probably MEAC SWAC Challenge. Yeah, because that had to be Southern. I think that was Southern and South Carolina State, which Southern won, and it was a hard fight battle. It was come down to the wire. If the weather hadn't have got us, South Carolina State probably would have came back. I'm just gonna keep it 100. I think that was probably one of those moments that I can think of that probably solidified, because you know it's a televised thing. Now, whether my parents could see me on TV or not, it's neither here nor there. Whether my mom could say that's my child, it's neither here nor there. But that's probably one of those moments, because you know it's either that or Bayou Classic.
You mentioned Steve Weiss, and I know you have a friendship with Steve Weiss. I remember I seen you talking to him when we were at the symposium and everything else. But like, who is somebody that recognized you for what you do and it kind of surprised you. And who was that one person that kind of recognized what BCE was and who you were early on, and it really gave you, some credit,
I would
some
say
credibility.
Tiffany Green, definitely Tiffany Green. One day they were doing, her and Jay Walker were doing a broadcast, and that's that Black College Live, their show. And Tiffany and I always like laugh and talk and text back and forth if there's anything I need from Tiffany, if she has a question. It's just very good energy. And Tiffany has helped me a lot with a lot of things that I needed. And just one day somebody texted me, they were like, "Did you watch Black College Live?" And I was like, "Oh, Tiffany and Jay's show?" No, I didn't catch it. I was out, and they was like, "Oh, it's something you need to see. They gave you a shout out." She's like, "Oh, well, Tiffany gave you a shout out." And I was like, "Oh, send it to me. And even to this point, like I looked at it, I think a couple of days ago, and I was still floored and Jay was floored too, because he was like, "Well, basically you use your shout out time to shout out Keisha, because I give Jay so much flack." But I was like, Tiffany was definitely one of those people that said, I got to give my girl Keisha a shout out for all she does with Black College Experience. And to hear that from her, and the caliber that she is, it was another humbling moment.
Mm-hmm. What's a goal of yours that you accomplished through BCE that was larger than life for you and really meant, so much?
Definitely
for you?
awarding scholarships. It was always my vision to give money back to students going to HBCUs. It didn't necessarily have to be student athletes. And then on the back goal, it was always to see them graduate. And so the first two, I remember the first two scholarships was like $800 total, it was like a $500 and $300. But I still remember that first student was one from Howard and then one from Southern. The one from Southern has graduated. The one from Howard is about to come out. And so I think up at this point, I've awarded 11 scholarships, and I think out of those, 5 or 6 have graduated.
Mm-hmm. So with keeping in the theme of being, of Black History Month and Black sports moments, what's a Black sports moment in history that really impacted you and has kind of had, a kind of reverberations of you and inspires you to do the things that you
what?
do?
I thought about this before, and because there's been so many things. And if I had to say, I would probably say Colin Kaepernick kneeling for what you believe. And I would say for me, it's standing up for what you believe in. And so many times I believe in these student athletes. Even if I know they done wrong, I'm never going to say I know they done wrong, because I believe so much in our athletes, and we face so much adversity at our historically Black colleges. And I believe in those moments when he kneeled, for me, it's like standing. It's the same thing. You're standing up for what you truly believe in. When you know something is wrong, we know what our colleges are. We know we're up against budget cuts. We know that we're up against, funding. We know what it is. And so when people say, "Oh, alumni should give back," it's systematic. We cannot. It would take 1 million of us to give $1 million to even catch up with our counterparts. And so for me, it's definitely probably that moment.
Mm-hmm. So last question, what is a piece of advice that maybe somebody told you or something that you learned that has resonated with you that you feel that next generation of students should
for me,
know?
it's definitely, once you start, keep going. Do not stop. Don't look back. Keep going. You're definitely going to make mistakes. And I always use this saying, sometimes you have to grow your wings on the way down. Sometimes you just got to leap. You can't think about where you're going to fall, what's going to happen. You just got to leap and just trust that when you get to the bottom, everything is going to be there, that you're going to fall and everything is going to be fine. Definitely, you just have to keep going, and you're not going to have all the answers. If you wait for the perfect moment, you're going to be waiting forever, because there is no perfect moment.
Mm-hmm. Miss Keisha J Kelley, this was a great conversation. As always, every time we get a chance to talk, I'm always learning something. I'm always getting something from you. Before we go, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what the website is, and anything else.
So I am on Twitter, Black College EXP, Instagram, Black College Experience, Facebook, The Black College Experience, YouTube is Black College Experience, TikTok is Black College Experience, and then the website is blackcollegeexperienceinc.com.
That's awesome. Keisha, as I said, it's always great every time we get a chance. And I said to you before when I asked you to do this, I could not do Black History Month content and not have you on the show. And it's just incredible. You know, I get chills when I get a chance to catch up with so many great people. And, you know, as I said, when I met you, I love what you do. It's always amazing to see people that just go out there and get it, and they hustle all the time. And, you know, for anyone that is listening to this, when you go to her pages, you will see that Keisha J Kelley is a hustler, and she goes out there and she truly gets it. So Keisha, I appreciate it. I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of your night. Hopefully I will be seeing you again at the symposium. Probably this year you can be speaking.
That's what we're claiming.
I'll be back in the audience. Claiming. So hopefully we're going to see you speaking. I know they haven't sent anything out as of yet. I'm still waiting on my invite as well, but hopefully we're all going to be there. Athletes to Athletes is looking to have a bigger presence there as well. So hopefully we will see you there. Keisha, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Athletes to Athletes podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. To engage with everything the A2A platform has to offer, go to the App Store and search Athletes to Athletes to download our new app. You can check out our educational material, and you'll ensure that you don't miss when a new episode of the A2A podcast drops. Again, thank you for listening. We'll see you again next time.